The three biggest differences. Or should I say three? Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Feli. I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. First of all, Happy New Year, everyone. Frohes neues Jahr. I hope you all slid well into the new year, as we say in Germany. Ich hoffe, ihr seid gut reingerutscht. Today is a special day, not just because this is my first video in 2022, but because 4 years ago today, I uploaded my very first video on this channel. So today pretty much marks my channel's 4th birthday, and to celebrate that with you, I thought it would be cool to kind of redo my very first content video. So the video that I published on January 14th, 2018 was just like an introduction video, and then later that month I published the first video where I actually talked about cultural differences. It was called USA versus Germany, 3 biggest differences, and it was about the biggest culture shocks I experienced as a German coming to the US. It's honestly kind of hard to watch for me now for a number of reasons. It's just a little cringe. But the topic is still relevant and something that I still talk about all the time here on my channel, but also with my friends and family. And of course, over the last 4 years, I've had so many new experiences. I've changed, and my view on that topic may have changed as well. So welcome to the 2022 version of USA versus Germany, 3 biggest differences, except that it'll be a few more points than those 3 today. This video is sponsored by Babbel, or Babbel in German, which is a great fit for my first video in the new year, because improving your second language skills is the perfect goal for 2022. And now that the holidays and parties and social commitments are done with for a while, you can use the cold winter nights to do some reading, some self-care, watching Netflix, and spending 10 minutes on Babbel before you go to sleep. That's the average length of one interactive Babbel lesson, and they're not designed by some algorithm or anything. No, they're created by real language teachers, and that, combined with the award-winning technology, gets you speaking in just 3 weeks. What's cool about Babbel is that it doesn't just teach you dry vocab and sentence structure, but the lessons focus a lot on the culture, the people, the history, and everyday things like local slang, or how to get through real-life situations like ordering food at a restaurant. Or, and that's something that's sometimes still difficult for me here in the US, even after 5 years, vocab and phrases that you might need at the doctor's office. So this is a German lesson from the pre-intermediate level, and this one is called Mein Hals tut weh, part 4, so my throat hurts.
Ich habe Husten.
Okay, ich habe Husten, I have a cough. Ich habe Husten.
Gute Besserung.
Gute Besserung.
Ich bin erkältet.
Ich bin erkältet. Okay, and now there is a dialogue. Mr. Wagner is at the doctor's because he has a bad cold.
Guten Tag, Herr Wagner. Was fehlt Ihnen denn?
Guten Tag, Frau Dr. Schatz. Ich bin am Wochenende in der Donau geschwommen und jetzt bin ich erkältet.
Guten Tag, Frau Dr. Schatz. Ich bin am Wochenende in der Donau geschwommen und jetzt bin ich erkältet.
Was? Im Februar? Kein Wunder.
Okay, now there's an exercise for separable verbs, which is a grammar topic here, but as you can see, the lesson goes on for a little bit longer. But in addition to the lessons, you can also listen to podcasts, play games, or take one of the live classes if you want to. And in case you're still a little hesitant, here is your sign that this is the right time to start, because you can now get 65% off your Babbel subscription if you click on my link in the info box below. And they even have a 20-day money-back guarantee, so you're really not taking a risk here. Now, back to my American culture shocks. Let's start by talking about those 3 points that back in 2018, I apparently considered the biggest differences between Germany and the US. I mentioned that number 1, everything is bigger in the US, like stores, streets, or cars, for example. Number 2, Americans are more outgoing than Germans. They talk to strangers much more, do a lot of small talk, and also the customer service is much better and people are generally friendlier to one another. And number 3, that Americans love to exaggerate and go all out on things. So how do I view those things today? I definitely still agree with what I said back then. Those points simply are some of the biggest differences between the two countries and cultures. But the longer you live in a place, the more you get used to things. And that's why some things that felt like these huge noticeable differences to me in the beginning now just feel normal. I totally get used to the size of things, for example, like how wide the streets are and how long it takes you to walk through a store here, or even the size of certain products or portions at restaurants. It's not like I'm not aware of it anymore. Like, I still know that that's all pretty big and that sometimes it's just wasteful and unnecessary, but I don't walk around every day thinking, wow, what a big truck, or what the fuck, they sell their mayonnaise in buckets here? You know, it's just become normal over time. Same goes for the whole exaggerating thing. Over time, I kind of just learned to understand Americans when they exaggerate and speak in superlatives or make crazy plans that they're never gonna follow up on anyway. I basically learned to translate that for myself. Like, when Americans say something was amazing, it means it was pretty good to me as a German. Or if they say that they can maybe get together on the weekend, it means probably not, and so on. Of course, that's not true for every single person. These are just some examples that I've come across in the past, but Americans definitely often communicate differently than Germans. And what I said about Americans being friendlier to one another and being unapologetically enthusiastic at sports events, for example, that's just stuff that I really enjoy about the culture here. I mean, sometimes I'm still pretty German at heart and catch myself thinking, okay, we got it, Ashley. Your sorority is literally the most amazing and awesome organization in the whole wide world, and you're obsessed with your sorority sisters. Or, okay, no need to start a fist fight at the bar over a college football game. It's just a game. But no, all jokes aside, those things still sometimes stand out to me, but mainly in a positive way that just brightens my mood. Now, as I said, over the last 4 years, I've also experienced new things, of course. I've been in new situations and have dealt with some new culture shocks, whether you want to call it that or not. One of those things is how wasteful this country is. I was aware of that in 2018, but over time I've just seen it over and over again in so many different parts of life that I notice it even more nowadays than I did when I first came here. Back then, I honestly just put it in the category of, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, and as a visitor, I was just trying not to be super judgy about certain things. But now, 4 years later, I have become more judgmental about it. I see people produce so much unnecessary waste every day, and it often comes from a place of complacency and a lack of awareness. I could give you 100 examples, like when a friend goes up to the soda fountain at a fast food place and doesn't take their already used cup with them, and I ask, why don't you just use the cup you already have? And they say, oh, but the cups are free. The money often seems to be the only aspect of concern there, not if something is actually necessary and needed in the moment. And unfortunately, the circumstances here make it pretty hard not to fall into those patterns. I've definitely become more wasteful in the US too. This is just one example, but I try to bring my own shopping bags to the grocery store usually, but when I go get something without planning it or just forget the bags, I have to painfully watch the baggers at the store double bag everything and then put 3 items max in each bag, or like just putting 1 loaf of bread in a bag by itself. And then I'm the weird customer that goes ahead, repacks the bags, because you can fit way more in those than people think, and then I tell the bagger to please use the rest of these for the next person, and they probably won't even do that. I mean, you should see the amount of plastic bags that people walk out of these stores with, and that's all unnecessary. And a few points that don't really make the situation any better are the lack of recycling options, the amount of disposable dishes that are used everywhere, or the amount of waste that one meal at a fast food place creates. It's similar with other sustainability topics, by the way. There's just not a lot of awareness here, but that would be too much for this video. Let's move on to another cultural difference that I've become more aware over time, and that is how socially independent Americans are. It's kind of weird to explain, but even though Americans are easier to become friends with in my experience, they don't seem to feel responsible for one another as much as Germans do. As I said, it's really hard to explain, but in German friendships, you can usually always rely on each other and know that people go the extra mile for one another, whereas I found that here, people are a little bit more independent when it comes to that. Which can be good and bad, depending on your preferences. Like, Americans often don't mind when their friend doesn't reach out for a while. Everyone lives their own life. Whereas in close friendships in Germany, I feel like you'd usually have to explain that somehow. It wouldn't just be, whatever, like in the US sometimes. Or last year I had a conversation with Josh and a couple German friends who also live in the US, and they talked about moving and how they showed up to their American friend's place to help them move at the time that they were told to, but the people moving weren't even home and hadn't told them because they didn't really expect their friends to just show up like that. And we all agreed that if we needed help moving, we'd probably rely on our German friends first and wouldn't really count on our American friends all that much in that regard, because they'd probably text us last minute saying that they can only come for an hour now or cancel altogether. I do sometimes like that Americans are more individualistic and independent in that sense, but it's definitely a cultural difference that takes a while to understand and adjust to. And one thing that's really started to get on my nerves recently is the way that professionals talk to clients sometimes. I'm not talking about customer service at a store or a restaurant, but rather when it comes to dealing with insurance agents or internet provider salespeople, accountants, or I just recently dealt with this, even lenders and contractors. I have so many stories here, but to summarize it, I'm surprised how in professional situations like the ones I just mentioned, I constantly get emails without a greeting. People don't give me a straight answer, but just beat around the bush and talk on and on with unnecessary explanations. People don't send me a proper invoice, but text me the amount and say to send the money on Venmo, or like internet providers trying to call me at night from their personal cell phones instead of just responding to my email. And of course, everyone always assumes you're on a first name basis, which I know is a cultural difference, and I usually like that, but not everything is always about being all buddy-buddy with each other, even though I know that's one of the main sales strategies in the US. But when it comes to finding an internet provider, buying a house, taking out a mortgage, handling my taxes, and so on, I need straight answers to my questions. I want numbers, I want information, ideally in full sentences, and I want a proper invoice sent to my email address as a PDF. I guess you can't get the German out of me in that regard, but in those situations, I don't really care for the small talk. I want people that know what they're doing, can give me qualified answers to my questions, and communicate with me professionally. And to all of you who are in the middle of writing a comment saying that not everyone is like that in the US, yes, I'm sure that's true, and I have had some good experiences too, but it's just something that I've never experienced in Germany a single time. If anything, people are too formal and quick to the point there, whereas here it's happened so many times that it's hard to keep count, honestly. I know this sounds a little like the arrogant European, but I sometimes feel like I'm talking to a 12-year-old in those situations. Now, I also often get asked if I experience culture shock when coming back to the US after a trip to Germany. And I actually just came back from Germany last week because I spent Christmas and New Year's Eve with my family. By the way, if you're interested in what those days usually look like in Germany, I recommend checking out my video on Christmas traditions and this one on German New Year's Eve. But overall, my answer to that is no. I don't really experience culture shock anymore when I travel back and forth. It was different in the beginning. Like, even when I traveled back to Germany, I would have reverse culture shock and think, wow, I never noticed how clean Germany is, or wow, there are bikes everywhere. But over time, I think my brain just got used to switching countries and cultures and kind of saved both places with their individual features as two parallel existing realities. And whenever I fly back and forth now, things don't feel foreign at all. It always feels like I was just there yesterday. It feels like having two homes, and sometimes I'm in home number one with all the people and customs that come with it, and sometimes I'm in home number two. However, the first few days when I'm back in the US, my brain does usually notice a couple things. Like how much personal space people here give each other at a public place when walking past someone or standing in line. Or how here in the Midwest, people always say, "Excuse me," when they have to get by you, even when there's a lot of space between you. In Germany, however, people will just touch your shoulder when walking by and not say anything, or walk up right in front of you to grab something out of the shelf without even acknowledging you. I also usually notice the small talk and the friendliness as soon as I'm back on American soil. That always makes me smile. One thing that really surprised me this time was when I took my first shower last week after getting back, and I was like, wow, it smells like a swimming pool in here. The thing is that that's not new. Like, compared to tap water in Germany, tap water in the US does have a pretty strong chlorine smell. It took me a while to get used to that when I first moved here, but now I really don't notice it anymore. The water just smells and tastes normal to me. Which is why I was so surprised that it stood out to me so much this time. I don't know what was up with that. And another thing that stood out to me more this time was how this is really not a country for pedestrians. I mean, that's old news too, but I walked a lot during my time in Munich, and when I went on a walk here a few days ago, I always had to make sure that I'm going somewhere with a sidewalk, and then I crossed this huge street and the pedestrian light just didn't turn green forever, but it didn't really matter because I was the only pedestrian there anyway. So that is my 2022 update on American culture shocks. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I forgot to mention, and I hope it wasn't too negative in this video, but I feel like the positive things just don't stand out to me as much anymore because I just appreciate them and I just got used to them so much. But if you would like to hear more positive things about the US, what I like about this country, why I like to live here, then check out this video. Now, I briefly mentioned reverse culture shock when going back home to Germany, and I was thinking about maybe making a video about that topic as well. So what do you guys think? Would you be interested in hearing a few stories of what shocked me when I came home to Germany after my first stay in the US, and which things stand out to me now? Let me know in the comments if I should make a video about that. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope that 2022 is treating you well so far. Make sure that you're subscribed if you like my content. You can also activate the bell to get notified about new uploads in the future. And of course, you can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and if you'd like to support my channel, just join my Patreon family or check out buymeacoffee.com. My shop is back too at felifromgermany.com. Check it out. Maybe you'll find something like this cool hoodie, and I hope I'll see you next time. Tschüss!